I was aching, bruised, cold, drenched, exhausted, and famished. I was out of my comfort zone, I was out of my depth, and I was out of my mind. I was running to Nacht Tashach. See the medallion? And one of the wettest weeks that winter. It had been pouring all week long. Now let me tell you what Nacht Tashach is. It's a 200-kilometer relay race. We run in a team of 8 people round the clock. And it covers, as you might guess from the name, areas that are important in the Tanakh and in 1948. But to tell you the truth, it was so wet that all I remember is mud. So I'm going to tell you all about mud. I got a new look at Eretz Israel that I have never seen before, and I'll bet you never really thought this much about mud. The fantasy that I had was, yeah, I knew it'd be muddy, but I'd heard that it was very well organized, that we'd have nice food and an organized rest area. There was even going to be a winery for wine tasting. I was really looking forward to that. So that was the fantasy. We'd be jogging through beautiful countryside. I'd already done Yam Layam and Har LaEmek, so I knew I could handle the running part. Okay, the reality. I was at Neve Shalom for my first segment of running, and it was pouring. The rain was thundering down. We actually had to yell to hear ourselves talk because of the racket of the rain on the tin roofs. You couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. I was crammed into a shed with 5 other people. The area was flooded. We were standing on paint cans, literally, and boxes to try to keep our feet dry. And then my teammate yells, "Hinei alush, hinei alush." So I go zipping out of the shed, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm running through 4 inches of water. I was soaked, and I hadn't even left the station yet. So I find alush, and I get the chip, put it on my wrist, and I go turning down to this field, and I step into a hole filled with shoe-sucking mud. It's like quicksand. And let me give you a piece of advice. If you ever step into shoe-sucking mud, do not panic, do not try to jerk your foot out or you will lose your shoe. That's why I call it shoe-sucking mud. It's like stepping into a bucket of cold, congealed oatmeal. So I gently pulled my leg out and I went running through the fields, clothing completely drenched and plastered in mud up to my left knee and gravel. And I'm sliding through these ditches and thinking, maybe it wasn't such a good idea after all. And then all of a sudden, there's a break in the clouds. The sun comes out and the rain stops. I'm looking at the trail and I can see it's going up into this beautiful forest. I mean, this is the Bet Shemesh area around the Trun, really very pretty. And I'm thinking, oh wow, piece of cake. So I go running up the hills and I'm running and running and I'm going slower and slower and slower. And I look down and I see my feet have turned into gigantic bricks. I'd like to introduce you to a second type of mud, which I call glue mud. The trails were covered with this very sticky red clay. It clings to the bottom of your shoes, the tops, the fronts, the back, the sides. So as you're running along, this sticky red mud clings to your shoes, and then you're running over these pine needles, see? And the pine needles stick to the mud. And the pine needles provide the perfect surface for more mud. And the more mud attracts more pine needles. And I remember thinking at that time, if you've ever wondered how Bnei Israel could build cities with straw and mud, the proof was on my shoes. It's amazingly stable stuff. I had clods the size of potatoes stuck to my shoes on all sides. So I tried scraping it off and I tried rinsing my feet in water and nothing worked. So finally I just ended up doing this sort of stupid cha-cha-cha movement every few steps to try to knock the worst clods off and going like this. And it took me forever. I think it took me about 50 minutes to run about 5 kilometers in those conditions. And by the time I got to the winery, then yes, they were having wine. I just said, oh no, just get me an energy drink. Please let me get into dry clothes. I couldn't change into dry clothes for another hour, but that's another point. So that was the first segment of my race, and I'd encountered shoe-sucking mud and glue mud. Second segment, that was at nighttime. Now did you know that at night, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between swamp, mud, and dry road? Everything looks gray. So you can't tell visually what you're stepping on. I was at Nativ Halamed Hay, and I was in pretty good shape. I'd had a cup of coffee. I even managed to grab a whole hour's sleep in a gravel parking lot because the organized rest area was so full we couldn't get any indoor spaces on the mats. But thankfully it wasn't raining at that time, and I actually managed to get a little bit of sleep. And then it was my turn, so I just rolled up my sleeves, turned on my lamp, and went running out. And I suddenly discovered the roads, which on paper are just these nice, gentle, undulating hills, are covered with this slurry of clay mud, that makes it as slippery as an ice rink. I'm not kidding. I've never run in those conditions before. So going up the hills, you're kind of going like this because every step you're slipping. And then going down the hills, you're actually sliding with both feet. So you have to fight to keep your balance the whole time. And you're running like this, and you're running like this, and then you're trying to think, is that swamp or is that a river ahead of me? And it just, every single step, you're just fighting to keep your balance. You have no idea. You feel like a truck at the end of it because all your muscles are aching. And when I finally got to an area of dry road, I was ready to throw myself down on the asphalt and kiss it. I was so happy to see dry, solid earth. And then that was the road to Avital. And a friend of mine later told me, wow, Avital, that's a really mean hill. And I said, I don't care. It could have been Everest. I would have just gone running up because I was so relieved to be on dry ground again. So that was the second segment. The third segment was mercifully almost no mud. They'd even shortened it. So the first two segments were bad enough. But that was my encounter with shoe-sucking mud, glue mud, and ice rink mud. So I just want to tell you, I am going to do this again, but I bought myself a pair of trail shoes, 2 pairs of trail shoes, so next year I will be prepared. Thank you.